Hi, I'm back. My name is Elisa, if you've not been here before, and this YouTube channel is all about me creating my dream book wardrobe from scratch, but also I make my own sewing patterns, which you can buy on Etsy. I've been taking the whole month of January off. Well, not really. I've been working a lot in the background, just not showing my face here on YouTube or anywhere else really, and that is because I had my head down in creating new sewing patterns and new content for my Etsy shop and YouTube channel. But now that time is over and we can get back into it, and I wanted to start it off with something really fun. So technically, we're de-staching today, but it comes with a twist. Normally, my de-staching videos, which are basically about me grabbing fabrics from my fabric stash, which is enormous, and making those things into garments. I usually make those things in a very short amount of time, maybe a few days, a week. But this time around, I was in a rush, so I had a lot of time, which means that today, all of those free garments that I'm making are also sewing patterns that you can get on my Etsy shop. How exciting is this? So if you see something you like, just have to jump over and get the sewing pattern, and then you can make it for yourself. So we are very well prepared today. I'll be making 3 garments, 3 tops to be specific. All 3 of those tops are things that either you have seen before, one of them at least, or there's something that I have been wanting to make for a while but just didn't get to do. All of them are definitely spring coated. It's end of January, I know, but I was able to keep my windows open all day today and I was not cold because the sun kept me warm. So I'm in a spring mood for sure. All 3 of them are also oversized, so they're made with comfort in mind. Each of them come in 3 sizes: extra small to small, medium to large, or extra large to 3XL European. So like I said, each of those tops is now available on my Etsy shop. You can buy them either individually or you can buy them as a 3 pattern pack, which just make them a little bit cheaper. So as per usual, I'll take you through the process of making each of those garments step by step, and we will have a final reveal at the end. Let's get started. We're gonna start off with the Carmy blouse. Carmy like the bear, not like Carmen the opera, although it is an off-shoulder Carmen blouse. This is something that I've seen on Pinterest recently and I just loved the volume and the static silhouettes that these tops came with. So you would want to make this in a cotton poplin or a linen, for example. All colors go. I wanted to make something super fresh and neutral, so mine's just boring white today, but you can obviously make it in whatever you want. Also, making this as a dress is just the easiest thing ever. All you have to do is extend the torso and you're good. This is definitely something I'm gonna make for myself this summer because it's so comfortable. It's such a staple. Maybe making it in a semi-sheer organza as maybe like a beach cover-up or something like this. Great. We love a versatile sewing pattern. And that's it, so let's go. I'll show you how to make it. Right, so let's make this Carmy blouse. This is gonna be the fastest top you've ever assembled. We have 2 of the same front and back bodice pieces right here with the facing attached. We do have the notches in the fold lines that we're gonna use to assess how far to fold over the neckline later. We simply remove the paper pattern, and then with these 2 cut layers of fabric, we place them right sides touching. If you do have right sides, do make sure to assess them first. If you don't, then you don't have to bother about that too much. Now I am simply placing them on top of each other, and I start to pin the side seams right here on both sides. Right, now that these 2 sides are pinned together, we can sew them. I'm going to use a stitch length of 3.5. So now that your side seams are sewn, you can go ahead and serge them on your serger if you have one. If you don't have one, you can go ahead and zigzag stitch these raw edges to make sure they're not fraying, or you could do a French seam. At this point, not only do I serge my side seams, I also go ahead and serge the length of the top immediately. Should you not have a serger, the way you can finish your length is by simply folding it over once, giving it a top stitch, and then folding it over once again to give it some sort of rolling hem or simple hem. I also go ahead and immediately serge these sections up here, so the raw edges of my facing piece. As this will be folded over later, I just want this part to be clean. So now that we have sewn the side seams, serged them, serged the length of the top as well as these upper edges of our facings, we can put the bodice to the side and instead grab our sleeves. I'm gonna remove the paper pattern. If you cut it correctly, you should have 2 sleeves. I'm gonna show you how to assemble them now. Basically, you can just leave them as you cut them and find your inseam, which is this side right here. I'm simply placing a few pins along the sleeve inseam, and I'm gonna sew that now. Again, same stitch length as before, honoring our seam allowance, which for me is about 1.5 centimeters. Once the inseam is sewn, we're going to serge it, and we're also again going to serge this upper edge of the facing that is also attached to our sleeve, which is later going to be folded over. I'm also again going to serge the hem slash cuff of my sleeve. Right, so once we've prepared our bodice and our sleeves in this way, we can assemble them, and I'm going to show you how now. All right, so place your bodice in front of you, making sure that the right side is out. This is going to give you an easier time. And place it so that you have access to one of the armholes easily. Grab a sleeve, as they're both identical. It doesn't matter too much which one you go for. And find the inseam. You are going to place the inseam on top of your side seam of your bodice. And this is where we're going to start pinning the armholes together. Now you just pin along the curves and make sure that the notch point that you gave yourself right here matches up front and back. Once you've done that, you're gonna go ahead and sew around your armhole curve, including these sections right here. What you want to achieve is that you sew together your facing and then from here continue into your armhole. This is going to give you this U shape with a strong bend at the ends. We are now going to fold over said facing to the inside of the top. So what you want to do is you can feel where this bend is, and this is going to guide you as to how far to fold over the facing. And you're going to start on one side and just pin it down. And now is also a good time for you to assess how wide the tunnel is supposed to be. Now there's obviously limitations because the facing in the pattern is 2 centimeters tall / deep, whatever you want to call it, and you will have added 1 to 1.5 centimeters of seam allowance, so that in total gives you a max amount of 3.5 centimeters for this tunnel. So you need to make sure that your elastic does fit into this. So my elastic just about fits in here. So again, like I said, simply fold the facing over and make sure you do it with an even distance all the way around. You have a slight curve around your sleeves. It's not gonna deter you from keeping the same distance with the tunnel in that section as well. All right, now that I have pinned the tunnel all the way around my top, I can now take this to my sewing machine and sew the tunnel with an even distance from this upper edge. The most important thing is that you are going to leave one section open so you can insert your elastic later. So measuring your elastic is actually pretty straightforward. I have a 1 meter times 2 centimeter elastic right here, and I'm just gonna wrap it around my shoulder circumference. And I'm thinking that it could be actually the perfect size. So I have exactly 1 meter here. I'm just trying to wrap it around myself the way the top would sit. I think this is a pretty good fit, so I don't really have to change anything about this. So I can go ahead and feed this into the tunnel that I created. All right, so I have the elastic and I have attached a safety pin, and now I'm gonna start to insert it into the tunnel to ruche up my neckline. Whew, that took a minute, but now that the elastic is fed through the tunnel, I can go ahead and sew together the 2 ends to finish this process. I have a slight overlap here and I'm placing 1 pin. And what I'm gonna do now is sew a rectangle around it and then 1 time diagonally through to make sure it's super secure. All right, that should do it. And now I just let it go into the tunnel, and I can now distribute everything evenly to reveal the gathered neckline. Nice. And now you just have to close this remaining section of your tunnel right here. When I feel that everything is in the right place, what I'm gonna do is sew over the seams that are continuous from my armholes to keep the elastic upright, because if I don't do that and I put the shirt on and off a couple of times, it's gonna start warping and twisting and turning. We all know that from elastic waistbands, which is a really annoying thing to happen. So to kind of like mitigate that, I'm just gonna stitch in the ditch in the armhole seams. Okay, neckline is done. Now let's finish this off. First thing I'll do is simply finish the length of the blouse by folding over my serged seam by about 1 centimeter and top stitching that. All right, this is how far we are. Sneak peek onto the neckline. I think it looks really quite cute. There's an artistic choice that you can make. Either you go with the dramatic bell sleeves and leave them as they are, maybe shorten them. But the way I have designed this top is that we're gonna ruffle up the cuff as well. So I'm gonna show you how to do that. It's basically the exact same thing as with the neckline. So to finish off this blouse, all we do is sew up our cuffs by the width of the elastic that we have. I have an elastic that is about 1 centimeter wide, so I'm creating a tunnel that is about 1 centimeter wide. Again, I'm leaving a little section open so that I can fiddle the elastic through the tunnel with my safety pin afterwards, and then we're done. When you measure how much elastic you need for your cuff, you just place it around your wrist, but do keep in mind that there is a lot of bulk that the elastic has to gather up, because we do have a very, very wide cuff, as you can see. So all of this needs to be gathered down to your wrist circumference. So do make sure to give yourself a little bit of space for comfort. So I'm gonna go about this wide. Perfect. And now I grab my safety pin and feed it through the tunnel that I've just created, just as I did with the neckline. Great, first one done, let's get to the next one, which is called Poppy, because it has a peplum. So creative, I know. I'm sure you've all seen that Johnny blouse that's been all over social media recently. That was the inspo for this top, not gonna lie. It's a very simple make. I've been debating giving it some puff sleeves because you know me, I love puff sleeves, but I decided against them in the end because I wanted it to give more cool girl and less cute girl. So that's why I made that choice. Any shirting fabric goes. It's supposed to be something that is lightweight and holds its own shape. So cotton or cotton poplin or anything like this works like a charm. You don't need any elastics for this, just a matching thread and you're good to go. So I'll show you how to make that one. Let's continue with the poppy blouse. The first thing that you need to do is to sew in your darts. We do have a dart in the bust area. I have given myself some notches to determine the width and I placed the needle to determine the height. That is obviously all in the pattern. And the same thing with the back darts, back shoulder darts. So I'm gonna sew them in now. Now that the darts are in and pressed, I'm placing the back side right side up, and then I place the front sides right side down so that we can sew together the shoulders as well as the side seams to create a little vest moment and to generally just assemble the bodice. Pretty straightforward. Now that everything's pinned, I'm gonna sew the shoulders as well as the side seams. Once your bodice looks like this, you can go and grab your sleeves. The sleeves are very straightforward as well. We just separate the two layers like that, and then we place them right sides touching so that we can sew the inseam. We can now insert the sleeves grab your bodice and place it so that you can easily access one of your armholes. You want to make sure that the right side is facing you. You then grab one of the sleeves, fold it so that the right side is facing out as well. Then grab your sleeve inseam and place it onto the side seam of your bodice. This is where you start pinning. We then move to one side, place a pin, move to the other side to place a pin, and then we reach into the garment, grab the inseam slash side seam and pull it inside out so we have easier access to the rest of the sleeve armhole situation. You can then, if you have a mid-notch point of your sleeve, place that onto the shoulder seam of your bodice, and now you can start to distribute the sleeve so that it's nicely fitted. Once you feel like you've placed it to your liking and everything looks nice and clear, you can have a check from the outside and then you can have a go at sewing it in. The thing I'm gonna do next is to sew my loops that I need to tie up the blouse in the center front. So to create the facing for this poppy blouse, I am going to grab some fabric of mine, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to trace the facing that I need onto the fabric. So I am grabbing a erasable fabric pen that I can iron off. So what I want to do is I just trace around the center front line as well as my neck hole, and then I trace, let's say, about 4 to 5 centimeters of the shoulder. Let's do 6 since we have a quite wide shoulder this time, and then I'll keep that same measurement down here, 6. Now I trace around my piece. I don't do the full line, just the important bits. Like this. I can remove my piece. I hope you can see this. I'm now going to cut around it. Mind you, you need to add seam allowance. Right, I have completed my 4 straps. They all look pretty dapper, and I also have my facing prepared right here. Now I'm going to use those things to finish up the bodice. What we want to do is to place the facing onto our neckline all the way around so that we can nicely overturn everything. So what I'm gonna do is I'll place the bodice in front of me so that the right side is facing up and the back side is facing me. And then I grab the facing and I place it right side down. I do have a seam here in the center back in my facing, so I can nicely align that with my center back notch that I have in the actual bodice. And then I simply align everything with each other, making sure that the shoulder seams match up, and then sort of just pinning everything from there. I continue with the center front and I just place a few preliminary pins here because in a minute I'm going to feed my straps that I've just prepared in here, because we're gonna sew everything attached in one go. Alright, I have now prepared the peplum so that we can attach it. Something that I like to do is to immediately finish the hem, which I've done by serging it and folding it over by 1 centimeter and top stitching it down, as well as the fronts. That's a very simple way to finish it. You could also just use a rolling hem to make it a little bit more seamless, and also depending on what kind of fabric you're using, it might look nicer. But for cotton, I felt like that was perfectly fine. The next step I'm going to take is to add 2 basting stitches to this top section of the peplum right here, with about 1/2 centimeter distance between them. And these are going to help me to gather up the peplum for the circumference of the underbust seam. Now that the basting stitch is done, we can grab our top and place it right sides up in front of us. making sure that we have a notch in the center back in the middle, which we have here. I, for once, have a seam in the back of my peplum, which according to the pattern, you should have a fold here so you wouldn't have a seam. I did that because of the way that I cut this fabric. I wanted the stripes to be horizontal, and the only way to achieve that was with having a seam here. So disregard that, but you should find your center back by also placing a notch here in your peplum, and then you place the two right sides touching like so, and place a pin. You then move to the front of your top and place the edge of your peplum, the one that you have already finished, perfectly at the edge of your seam right here where the facing overturns, so that these match up. You also want to place a pin here. And the same thing applies to the other side. We can start to gather up the peplum so it fits the circumference of the underbust seam. For that, we grab two ends of our just placed basting stitch, grab that here and start to pull, and you will see that the fabric starts to gather along those seams that you've just placed. Once you've met the distance, which I seem to have now, you can close up your gathering stitches by just tying up the loose ends, and then you can start to evenly distribute everything. So once you've pinned this down, once you've ruffled it and pinned it down, it's gonna look something like this. And we now have to sew it attached. Now that I've done that, I'm going to finish off this seam down here and make it look super clean. So what I'm gonna do is, I will fold the facing over like that to the inside, and I'll pin it down. So when I now serge this in a second and then turn it back over, it's gonna have a super nice and clean, seamless finish, and we're not gonna see the serged seam. When I now turn this back the right side out, we should have a beautifully overturned section right here. So you can see that the facing nicely hides away the serging in that section. Something that I also want to do to keep the facing on the inside is fold it over neatly here in the shoulder section and place the shoulder seam of the shell and the shoulder seam of the facing bed center on top of each other. I'm going to place a pin perpendicular to my shoulder seam, and then I'm going to stitch in the ditch this down, because this keeps the facing on the inside whenever we put on or take off the blouse. And now indeed the very last step is to try on the blouse and have a go at how long you want your sleeves to be. So I want them to be exactly this length. So what I've done is I've placed a needle. Now I'm gonna fold this down. I have a crease here conveniently, so I will just cut that back quite drastically, and I'm gonna use this piece as a guide for the other side. Now I can cut it the exact same way. There's again obviously options of how you could finish this. I am going to serge it, and then I'm going to use some fusible interfacing to glue it up on the inside. We'll head into the finale, which is something that you guys been asking for. A lot of you actually. I got a lot of requests for this blouse. It is something that I've made before, so now I have two of them. I call it the Oakley blouse. I know it's a bit of an awkward name, but I needed a name that started with an O and ended with a Y, because Carmy, Poppy, Oakley, and O because this is part of my O series, the Ophelia dress, the Odette dress, and now the Oakley blouse. All of those resewing patterns feature a similar upper bodice construction, or actually almost the same. She's made from a gorgeous, beautiful organza. I actually bought this organza at the same time I bought the pink one for the pink version of this top. I want to say a year and a half ago, maybe more. It is such a nice quality. it comes with a usable selvage, so I'll show you how to utilize something like that in the making of this blouse. It is dopamine dressing at its finest, and we're here for it. I think if you're looking for something that is perfect to wear for dinner with friends, birthday parties, generally going out, this is it. Because it's lightweight, it's beautiful, you immediately look dressed up just with jeans really and some nice shoes, and you're gonna look cool and put together, I think. And we love the bow ties in the back, we just love them. So what you need for this is about 2.5 meters of organza and a matching thread, as well as a 1/2 centimeter wide elastic, maybe about 1/2 meter of it, to gather your cuffs. So let's get into it. Alright, my sewing machine and serger are threaded in the correct color, which is this beautiful baby blue. I'm going to start out with the front bodice piece, which you might recognize because it's from my series of O's. So I have an Ophelia dress that has the same shape on the bodice. I have the Odette dress that has also the same shape but with a v-neck, and now we have the Oakley blouse. So if you've made either the Odette or the Ophelia dress, you kind of know how to go about this. We do have a section here that needs to be gathered up to create a little gathered bust moment. We don't have a dart in the bust section. There is an additional step here though, which is that we have 2 layers of organza right here, and that is to make it easier to style and wear this blouse eventually, because one layer is a little bit too see-through for my taste. So in this section I have 2 layers. If you don't work with organza, you don't have to do that, but I think this blouse really thrives when made in this type of material, so I'm going to show you how I'm working with it now. So the first thing that you want to do is to place your 2 layers on top of each other, making sure the left side of your top is facing the right side of your bottom, so that the 2 right sides are basically facing up. What I'm going to do first is to place a few needles along the shoulder, and that is because we want to merge these 2 layers into one by basting them together. And I'm gonna do that along the shoulders, potentially the neckline and the side seams. Organza is a notoriously unwieldy fabric, so I think I could have done a better job at cutting 2 identical pieces, but this will make do. I'm gonna give this whole perimeter a basting stitch, meaning I'll set my machine to 5, which is the biggest stitch available, and I'll just sew around it, taking a little bit less than the seam allowance, so eventually all of those basting stitches will be hidden away if you choose not to remove them. Now that this front piece is basted together, we can focus on gathering up the underbust section. To gather up the bust section, I have just placed basting stitches between my bust notches right here, where I placed my pins as well. So what I'm doing is I tie up one end of the basting stitch on both sides, and then I grab the other and use that to simply ruche up this section like that. Better to do 2 basting stitches, but 1 does the trick as well. Once that is done, we can grab the back bodice pieces. Now, for the back bodice, I decided to just go with 1 layer because it's okay for the back to be a little bit more transparent than the front. This definitely needs a press. The back has darts in the shoulder, which I'm now going to place. Now that I have the darts in the shoulders, I can grab my prepared front piece and place it right sides touching onto the back side. I'm now going to pin together the shoulders, and also I'm going to pin the side seams. Up next, I'm going to sew the shoulders and the side seams together. Alright, we have the bodice assembled, and I'm now immediately going to serge all the inside seams, and I'm going to press them as well. Alright, so I just spent a little bit of time to prepare the peplum off camera, and what I did is I grabbed my peplum pieces, which are as such. We have 2 back peplum pieces, which are each 50 centimeters, and they're just cut on a double layer of fabric. And then we have the front peplum piece, which is cut on the fold. So these 2 are the same pattern piece, just cut differently. And this gives us this quite long peplum piece that we can now gather. So I've just basically sewn the sides together. I've immediately serged them as well. I added 2 rows of basting stitches onto the upper edge of my peplum, which is where it's going to be joined with the underbust seam of the bodice. And because my organza has a really pretty selvage that does not fray, I utilize this as the hem of the peplum. If you do not have fabric that has this type of selvage and doesn't offer that opportunity, you could just go ahead and prepare your peplum with a rolling stitch, with a rolling hem that would then look something like this. Also pretty, but I opted for the selvage option today. So now I'm going to show you how to join the peplum and the bodice together. For that, I'm grabbing my bodice and I'm placing it right side facing up on the table in front of me. I do have a center front notch right here, which I'm going to use to align with my center front notch of the front of my peplum. So to find the center front notch, simply place the two side seams on top of each other, and then at the fold, place a little notch. You then want to place the peplum right sides touching onto your bodice and align the notches of the bodice and the peplum. This is where you're going to place your first pin. You then move on to the side seams, so you align the side seam of the peplum with the side seam of the bodice, and the same thing applies to the center back, so you align the two center backs with each other, which at the moment are still raw. All right, once that's done, we can gather up the peplum. Now I can start to grab them and gather up the peplum. Once you feel like you've reached the right amount of gathering to align the peplum with the underbust seam, you can start to pin it down. It's the exact same thing that we did for the poppy top. The peplum is now attached to the bodice, which means we have the majority of our blouse assembled, and I am now going to move on to the sleeves. For the sleeve, I'm grabbing one side and I'm placing it right sides touching to sew together the inseam of the sleeve. So once the inseam is sewn together and serged, you can go ahead and serge the cuff of your hem, slash, fold it over once and give it a good press, and then fold it over once again to create a tunnel that you can use to insert your elastic to gather up the cuff. I have the 6mm elastic right here, and I will add a little bit of extra because we always have to consider the bulk that happens when we gather down the organza. So I think I'm gonna go for about this much. Then I grab a safety pin, got a new one right here, not the one that I've been holding on to for 2 years. And now I'm going to go into the tunnel that I have just sewn, and I'm just going to gather up the cuff as I have done with the Carmy blouse. I definitely want to make sure that I'm not losing the end of my elastic right here, so I'm placing a pin. And now we want to create two of the same. All right, now that I have two of the same sleeves, I can insert them into the blouse. So I'm gonna do that by placing one of the armholes in front of me. I'm gonna grab one of the sleeves and I will place the inseam of the sleeve onto the side seam of the blouse. This is where I usually like to get started. Then I place a few pins in the armpit area towards the front and the back. Then I reach into the blouse and pull out the sleeve, and I continue this way. And because we have a oversized sleeve, we will have some ruffles in the shoulder section. So this is up to taste for you, how far you want to pin it flat and where you want the ruffles to start. It is also up to you whether you want to hand pleat the ruffles or if you want to ruffle them up with the basting stitch method. Either works. I do like to hand ruffle, which means I'm going to use a lot of pins. So now that I have pinned the sleeves in, I can go and sew them. Here we go, the sleeves are in. It's so beautiful, this organza, I'm obsessed with it. I am now gonna serge the armholes to finish them off on the inside. And the next thing we will do is to finish the center back and add the collar, and then we're done. Right, so I have these quite large, long strips of fabric that I'm now going to overturn to create the ties for the back of the blouse. So I have prepared these 4 sashes yesterday. Now I grab 2 of them and focus on one side of the blouse. What I'm going to do is to serge the back of my blouse, fold it over once and top stitch it. If you don't have a serger, you would go and just create a simple hem by folding it over once and then folding it over once again too close. So to actually attach the sashes, I'm going to place them along the center back, and I will make a point of placing them 1 centimeter down from the edge of my neckline, because this is the seam allowance I gave myself for the neckline. So this is where I place my sash. And then similarly, I place the other sash. I always make a point of having the seam of the sash facing downwards right here, just over where the peplum is attached, just over the undervest seam. So at this point, again, if you don't have a serger, attach it, fold it over once, give it a good press, and fold it over once again and top stitch it. I am just going to attach these now real quick on my sewing machine, and then I'll serge the entirety of my center back, fold it over once and top stitch it. Now I will fold this over, as I mentioned, and give it a top stitch. But I will try to leave the sash out like this, so it actually can easily float into the center back and isn't prohibited by being sewn backwards. So you fold this over, under, fold the seam allowance, and then give it a top stitch. Here we are, the very last step to finishing Oakley. So what we have here is a strip of fabric that features the micro collar. So what I'm going to do is I will fold the collar right sides touching, and I will pin the sides down, because what we want to do is to sew down the sides, so then we can overturn these edges and have a clean finish, which will be seen in the center back. So again, just folding the right sides touching like that, and then I sew down here, I fold it over, and then this nice edge appears. I'm now going to take this to my iron and give it a really nice press. So this is what the micro collar is supposed to look like. I am now going to add 2 rows of basting stitches onto this raw edge down here. We're going to use those to gather the micro collar down to size. What I'll do is I'll just fold it in half and find the midpoint, so we know where to place it down in the center front of our neck hole. So I'll grab my blouse, I place the micro collar down onto the blouse with the center notch that I just created down onto the center front notch of my blouse. Then I go back to the center back and I place the edge that we have just made flush with this seam back here, so we have a clean finish eventually. Now we can gather it down to the distance of our neckline. Once the side is gathered down the way I want it to be, I can start to pin it along the neckline. So eventually I'm gonna have something like that. All of it is gathered, all of it is pinned. I'm now going to attach it with a basting stitch, followed by a serger stitch, and then I will fold it under and understitch the seam allowance so the micro collar stands up, and then we're done. Guys, I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know which of these free garments is your favorite. I have so much coming for you. I'm so excited about all the things that we'll get up to this year. Next time we'll start on a new, very big, huge, massive, enormous project, about 20 meters worth of fabric. So stay tuned for that. I'm so glad that I'm done with this project now, so I can head into that next one. And I hope I'll see you there. I hope I read you in the comments, and see you next time.